Hey everybody, Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick update on my experience with the Samsung Galaxy Tab S lineup of tablets. As you may have noticed, I've got the 32 gig titanium bronze on the left, the 16 gig white version of the 10.5 on the right, and then up above them I have the 16 gig titanium bronze 8.4. So what do these tablets share in common? Essentially all of the same specifications other than screen size and of course price point. The 32 gig 10.5 being the most expensive, you're looking at $549. You can step down to the 16 gig version, or start there rather, at $499, because keep in mind all of these tablets do have a micro SD card slot for storage expansion. The least expensive option, as well as the most portable, is the 8.4 up at the top of the frame. $399 is your starting price point for the 16 gig version. There is currently no other option, but who knows, down the road Samsung may end up introducing a 32 gig model. But as I mentioned, micro SD card slots all around, which you can take up to 128 gigs if you decide to pick up a 128 gig micro SD card, which are still expensive but pretty affordable when you take into account what you're actually spending on internal storage on a regular basis, and for what needs, of course, depending on each consumer individually. So let's talk about build quality and what I've noticed in terms of the experience between dealing with the 8.5 inch or the 10.5 inch, because you might be trying to make that decision right now which one is right for you. Initially, I was really drawn to the 8.4, and that's simply because the 8.4 seems like the portability champion. It seems like it has really everything in its favor. Again, they're all sharing the same internals, right? So how could you possibly go wrong with taking the lighter version that has the higher pixel density? But from what I've seen, the displays on the 10.5s look a little bit sharper, and that may have to do with the type of display that we're looking at. There's been a lot of talk about Samsung using pentile display here on the 8.4, but not on the 10.5. So that may be something that you want to see in person for yourself, and that's part of the reason I'm mentioning it here today. And really, in my opinion, the 8.4 still blows away everything that you've ever seen. And when you compare it to just about any other tablet on the market, you will instantly notice that it just makes everything look last gen. With regard to its form factor, it's pretty much the same as the Tab Pro 8.4, so that isn't a deviation, but the styling is definitely another beast altogether. And I actually think Samsung did the right thing here. This is the first time in a long time that I can tell you that the styling of the tablet I actually personally like. If you've watched any of my reviews over the years of Samsung's tablets, the design department was never necessarily my at least favorite point. Samsung's always been cutting edge with hardware, technology, and that's what's kept them relevant. Their software now too is a great selling point in this lineup, although some of you do hate what TouchWiz, the magazine UX, has to offer. The majority of the public does embrace it. So what at least I've noticed here, beyond the gorgeous Super AMOLED displays, 2560 by 1600 resolution all around, no matter which size you go with, keep that in mind. That's why the 8.4 seems like the best value, and I think most retailers thought that this would be the one that would fly off the shelf. I actually decided personally to end up going with the 10.5 because really, if this is all about the display and the fact that Samsung has set a new standard with their Super AMOLEDs now finally finding their way into the tablet space, then really you should leverage it as best as possible. And that's exactly what the 10.5 inch class does. We got a larger display than the 10.1 inch class that Samsung has traditionally marketed at this price point. Yes, we do still have the same Exynos 5 octa-core chip that we saw starting out in the Galaxy Note 10.1 2014 edition, but where we do benefit is that all of the software, beyond just the styling of the tablet, has been revamped. Of course, out of the box we have KitKat, and we have actually gotten a major benefit from the fact that this software has had time to bake and cook in those previous gen tablets. Not only the Note 10.1 2014 edition, but how about the Tab Pro, the Note Pro 12.2, all of these tablets where the magazine UX TouchWiz experience has evolved. A lot of that lag that people experienced at the beginning has been reduced. Now, these aren't lag-free tablets. You're still going to find hiccups. I know I'm not showing any of that here now, but it'll happen. And if you're a Samsung user, you already know what I'm talking about. Very easy to get rid of. You can simply install a launcher over any of these devices. Yes, you're not replacing the actual ROM, so you're not cleaning up the bloat and getting it off the device, but you are putting it aside essentially without giving up any of the great things like the multitasking or the bevy of wide features that all three of these tablets bring to you in terms of software. So even if you throw on a custom launcher, keep in mind it's a launcher, not an actual replacement for the entire experience. Of course, the look and feel will change, but all of those software features that you know and love, or maybe hate, are still going to be accessible. Now, as I bring up the actual settings here, you can see they've done a really nice job in keeping everything clean, in my opinion, and just continuing to improve on what you would like to see out of a clean menu system. It's not perfect, but that's all really a matter of what you actually expect to get out of your experience. So far, for me, these tablets have all performed exactly as I would expect with the hardware they have. I mean, 3 gigs of RAM puts them on par with basically everything in the marketplace right now. Of course, that can change very easily in the not-so-distant future. But overall, I don't see any manufacturer coming out to match the Super AMOLED displays. And if all you're buying this tablet for, or at least the primary focus, is media consumption, then the Super AMOLED is where your money should be, in my opinion. And this has nothing to do with whether or not you prefer an operating system. Clearly, if you do prefer an operating system, you're going to stick with that OS. But OS aside, you just aren't going to find this sort of viewing media consumption experience because no one else is giving you a display like this. And I mentioned in my video focused on the display that all of these tablets sport that I really don't care as much about the pixel density race that's continued to thrive in really what is more about marketing than performance than bringing us a new technology. And Super AMOLED is not new anymore, but it's new because this is the first 10.5-inch form. And that's also the first 8.4-inch. So I've already touched on the difference, the pentile versus what we're getting here in the 10.5. Things definitely do look a little bit sharper, but styling, again, as I mentioned earlier, a big improvement. I mean, there's no more faux stitch around the edges. This just looks like a piece of tech, and that's what these tablets always should have looked like. And the integration, going, I would say, a step beyond what they've done in the past for the actual book cover case, even though I don't have it here. I've seen it. It is really nice. And when it comes to retaining the fit and finish, as Samsung always tries to do with their book-style covers, this is the best yet. Granted, it is expensive, but they always are. $70 retail. During the launch week, Best Buy did have it on sale for $39.99. Fortunately, I didn't get my hands on one because they just weren't in stock. But really, the styling of the tablet, they got it right this time. The only thing, and this is my biggest gripe right now with the entire line, is that we don't have USB 3.0. If you are upgrading from any other tab made by Samsung, whether it's the Pro version, the Note, whatever size, if it's running the exact same hardware we're looking at here, the same processor, the same amount of RAM. I mean, the Tab 8.4, of course, doesn't sport the 3 gigs of RAM that you get here in the Tab S, which is that's another thing a lot of people seem to miss. And RAM is important when you're dealing with the Magazine UX. Let's not forget that. It's heavy. There's a reason it's there. There's a reason it was put in the original Note 10.1 2014 edition. It actually proves that Samsung was really bleeding edge at that point, which is how I reviewed the tablet at the time. It's just the software that they've been catching up on this whole time. And that's part of why they've started to win the war in terms of shipping more units than anyone in the world. And that's what they're trying to transition to here on this S lineup, because we already know the Galaxy S5 is the best-selling phone out there right now. And Samsung clearly wants their Tab S lineup to be the best-selling tablet. So I think this puts the best foot forward. I mean, the fingerprint scanner, really is not a necessity at all. When it comes to battery life, again, had these tablets had USB 3.0 incorporated, we'd have faster charging. So that's something that I'm disappointing beyond just faster transfer speeds. And that is one area that I will criticize all three of these. Charging time is painfully slow. The good news is battery life on all of these is better than anything that came before it. So we're not just getting better displays, even though the internals are the same. We're getting better software, better battery life, better styling. I probably should have just said that at the very beginning of the video rather than 10 minutes in, because that is what the Tab S lineup is really all about. You are getting improvements in every form and fashion. And that's critical, especially considering, as I said before, the hardware has lasted so long because it really is that powerful. I mean, you have 2 quad-core chips in there. It still can benchmark and hang with some of the latest chips that are hitting the market. Of course, a new generation is right around the corner, but I assure you it will not be paired with a Super AMOLED until Samsung replaces what we're looking at here. And with the way they've been cranking out tablets lately, I can't really assure you that that's not going to happen in the so immediate future, because they really just don't stop, do they? But it's because they're doing well. So I've made it clear I really do like a lot about these devices. It's the extra polish that Samsung's been missing for a while, in my opinion. You will still run into some lag here and there, but the infrared remote, the cameras, the screen, and just the fact that you are getting some best-in-class build quality, even though it's all plastic. I mean, the 10.5 inches weigh in at a pound, which is still incredibly light for a 10.5-inch display, or rather 10.5-inch tablet, I meant. Another thing I want to point out, just with engineering, that I noticed in the course of my use, again, for those of you trying to decide, Samsung put the speakers on the side of all of these tablets. But it seems to me the engineering is a little bit backwards on the 8.4. Of course, feel free to comment on this. Give me your input as well. You can see we've got the speakers right there. And that appears to be the top of the tablet, because, as you may have noticed, the power button, volume rocker, it's all located right up there at the top. The infrared as well. So essentially what I'm alluding to is that if you're watching video like this in landscape mode, your hands are going to block the speakers. Now that's easily rectified by flipping the tablet over, but that isn't a problem that you suffer with the 10.5 inch. And it's not really a problem. I mean, it's just something I'm pointing out for users to be aware of. And the only reason this is awkward, because you might think, oh, it's no big deal, is that now your power button, volume rocker, they're all on the bottom, which, you know, if you're holding it, I guess you're not going to hold it like this, so that's not really an issue. But it's just awkward for me to have buttons there on the bottom, especially when clearly on the larger 10.5 edition, they made it very clear. I'll go with the titanium bronze this time. You already saw the white one. They made it very clear that they put the speakers on the top of the tablet, so you're never going to interfere with them during, holding the device. So I thought that was noteworthy. So you're not going to need to flip this over. Again, the power button, volume rocker, all right there at the top of the tablet. So I just found that odd, but it's incredible to me that the back end or back side of this entire lineup, which does mirror the S5, which took so much heat for being ugly, which I thought was unfair because, look, it wasn't everyone's favorite, but they took that design and just improved upon it. They all have that brass finish around the side, which you should be able to make out, and it's nice. I mean, it's much nicer than the previous generation, that silver that essentially tried to look like metal. Now we have something that matches. It just seems like the color scheme here is far better than anything they've done in the past, in my opinion, no matter which option you go with. Now, when it comes to battery life, I've mentioned that all of them outdo their previous generations, and they should. They've got Super AMOLED displays that, when not viewing things like white screens, like if you go with dark backgrounds, battery consumption is optimized. I mean, that's where Super AMOLEDs definitely bring far better battery life than traditional LCDs. But if you're going to be constantly on a white background browsing the web, then it will sip juice just as quickly, if not more so, than a traditional LCD. But what's really nice about all of these tablets is that they really do bring in another gen of life. So with the battery, so with the 10.5 inches, at least in my experience, you're looking at with brightness at around 25 to 35, I would say percent, somewhere in that range, you're going to get 10 to 12 hours, even though Samsung is putting a 9-hour mark on this. And that's not a ridiculous estimate. This is realistic. Now, if you bring up brightness to a level where I would say you're going to really enjoy looking at the Super AMOLED, and you really shouldn't sell it short, so let's say 50% or more, then you're going to drop down to that 7 to 9 range. So more realistic numbers there as you crank brightness up. Of course, that's all going to depend also on how you're pushing these tablets. They all can multitask, don't forget that. So little powerhouse in the 8.4, since it does pack all of the same hardware that we have here, as I try to make it to one of these, where you can easily be multitasking in a moment. So clearly, the multitasking is going to be a better experience on the 10.5-inch real estate. It's just going to lend itself to a more natural, almost computer-like experience. I'm shocked to see Samsung not launch the keyboard case in tandem with a device like this. It is their flagship, and it deserves some respect on the street here, and I don't understand why we don't have that accessory. So that's another bit of a failure on this launch, despite the case is a great redesign for this lineup from the previous gen. The magnetic lock on the back really does work well. Several different positions to use the tablet in for productivity as well as consumption. So really, they've got a knockout lineup here. Even though, again, people are going to take jabs at this lineup for not having one of those new Qualcomm chips, or even the Snapdragon 800 that you'll find in the data-enabled version of this tablet for various carriers. You still have to be realistic about what your real-world performance is going to be with the Exynos 5 that's driving this device with 3 gigs of RAM. And then take into account the fact that you are getting every feature that anyone has ever imagined a tablet could bring, even if it isn't a Surface Pro with a full operating system. Forget about even comparing it to an iPad. I mean, there are plenty of people that love iPads and love Surface Pro devices, but they know that it's a lot easier to do certain things on a device like this. It's just more natural. You're fewer touches away from getting data and functions that just simply don't exist on other offerings. So that's my rant on the brand new Tab S lineup. It really does represent the flagship that Samsung wanted it to be in just about every way other than the USB 3.0 charging. Yes, we could have gotten a newer chip, but maybe we wouldn't have seen this tablet until September. And for all I know, in September, they might be preparing the Note version of this, which would be the only thing in my mind that would actually take a step in front of this lineup, which is traditional to Samsung structuring and pricing. If you think about it, of course, the Note is always more expensive than the S and more high-end. So that's probably where we're going to see the beefier specifications, as well as hopefully eventually a 12.2-inch Super AMOLED display. And not that I have any inside info, it just makes logical sense that is the direction things are going in. So hopefully that's what we'll see, but that should give you confidence that if you do pick up any of these, you're going to have one of the best pieces of hardware, I'm going to say, for at least 6 months. And that's if you don't care about the pen, because granted, even though I mentioned that there will be a beefier chip in the Note version, maybe even a bigger screen, and of course that Wacom experience, which is second to none, you will be paying more, and in real-world experience, if you don't care about the pen, the actual experience may not be that much of a difference, especially considering the magazine UX experience TouchWiz is still going to be there. But keep in mind, easily covered with a launcher, and you'll still retain all of the multitasking, all of the features. You will not be able to get rid of this, of course, the settings, the actual menu system. That's going to be here no matter what. So that's here to stay. The only way to get rid of that is with a fresh ROM. And I believe that these devices are rooted already. For those of you also wondering about writing to SD because of KitKat, you can do that, but you will need to use Samsung's own file browser. That is the way to write to external storage cleanly without an issue. I know a lot of you are saying, oh, KitKat basically blocked that. Well, Samsung realizes it, and they're doing what they've always done, which is catering to the consumer. They know what you want. They have given you a pathway to still writing to your external storage, so you don't have 128 gigs of useless space. So I think that pretty much covers everything. By the way, brightness has been at 100% on all of these tablets. If you've been watching the battery life through the course of this 20-minute video, if you've made it this far, congratulations. So keep that in mind when trying to do your math calculations. But as I've mentioned, battery life easily will get you through a day on any of these. Brightness is where you're going to live or die, and most of you are going to want to crank up the brightness because these displays deserve it. But I know a lot of users out there who really can't take more than that 25% threshold. It's just too bright for their eyes. I understand where they're coming from. And for those of you that do go that route, you're going to benefit even more if you stay away from those white backgrounds and pages. Dark backgrounds are your friend with Super AMOLED, or I should just say AMOLED displays in general. Beyond that, I'll save another video, believe it or not, for software tour on these tablets. But I really just wanted to run through build quality and my overall opinion of the Tab S lineup, which is what today's video was all about. So good things so far, and right now this definitely looks like the tablet lineup to beat. Nothing else on the market really can compete with it, and that includes any other manufacturer, any other platform. Of course, comparing this to something like Surface Pro 3 wouldn't be fair to either device because they are operating in different worlds, but inherently people will compare them. And if that's something that you're all interested in actually seeing, I will do my best to compare these devices, at least on a practical use for what consumer I think Samsung and Microsoft, respectively, is trying to tailor them to. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. And of course, as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.